Imagine being surrounded by flames with nowhere to run. On January 7, 2025, that became my reality. My name is Jack, I'm 9 years old, and this is my story of survival during the Los Angeles wildfires. It was a normal day, blue skies, laughter, but by sunset, it was a fight for our lives. They call it one of the worst wildfires in history, and I saw it all. Stay with me as I share how a single moment changed everything. The day started just like any other. I was in the backyard, tossing a stick for Max, my fluffy golden retriever. He loved to chase it, his tail wagging like crazy as if the world would always be this simple and happy. But something felt strange. The sky looked off. It was orange, not the kind you see at sunset, but deeper, almost angry. Smoke hung in the air, turning the sunlight into something that felt heavy and unsettling. I remember thinking it looked like the sun was melting right above me. I didn't give it much thought at first. I was just a kid playing with my dog, not realizing the world around me was shifting. But then, the smell hit me. It was sharp, almost like burning plastic mixed with wood. My chest tightened with each breath, and my eyes stung so badly I had to blink every few seconds. The usual hum of the neighborhood, a barking dog, a distant lawnmower, was replaced by an eerie silence. And then came the sound. Sirens. Loud, piercing, and everywhere. They echoed across the streets, bouncing off the houses. I froze, the stick still in my hand, and Max stopped, too, his ears perked up as if he understood something I didn't. The back door slammed open, and my mom's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Jack! Get inside now!" Her tone sent shivers down my spine. She wasn't just calling me in, she was scared. Really scared. My dad was right behind her, keys jingling in one hand, his phone pressed to his ear with the other. He was shouting something into it, but I couldn't make out the words. All I knew was that his face, usually calm and steady, was pale and tense. "Grab Max. We need to go." Mom's voice cracked as she hurried me along. I still didn't fully understand what was happening. Go where? Why? But I could tell from their faces this wasn't the time for questions. I dropped the stick and scooped up Max's leash from the patio table. He barked once, sensing the tension, but he followed me as I ran inside. The next few minutes were a blur of chaos. Mom threw clothes into a bag while Dad frantically packed important papers into a box. I kept asking, "What's going on?" but they only said, "There's no time, Jack. We'll explain later." Through the front window, I could see our neighbors doing the same, cars pulling out of driveways, people running back and forth with panicked expressions. The air outside seemed thicker now, the smoke almost visible in swirls. My throat felt scratchy, and I coughed every time I inhaled too deeply. We finally piled into the car, me in the back seat with Max curled up on my lap, my parents in the front, their faces tight with concentration. As we drove down the street, I glanced out the window. That's when I saw it. The flames. They weren't far, maybe just a few streets over, creeping closer with every passing second. It felt like they were alive, reaching out with fiery fingers toward everything I knew. My stomach twisted as I watched the fire devour trees, cars, and fences. It didn't care what it touched, it just kept coming. I squeezed Max tighter, whispering, "It's okay, boy. We'll be fine." But deep down, I wasn't sure if I believed it. Reports later said that the fire spread faster than anyone expected. Fueled by dry vegetation and strong winds, it moved at a terrifying pace, consuming thousands of acres in just a few hours. Streets I had walked on just days before were now unrecognizable, replaced by a landscape of ash and destruction. As we inched along the packed road, I noticed something else: the people around us. Some were crying, their faces streaked with tears and soot. Others stared blankly ahead, their expressions numb. But then there were the helpers. I saw firefighters directing traffic, their uniforms smeared with ash but their determination shining through. As we drove further from the flames, I kept looking back, watching the orange glow fade into the distance. The drive felt endless. The packed streets moved at a crawl, and the glow of the fire followed us like a shadow. My dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and my mom kept looking over her shoulder, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The radio crackled with updates about the fire, calling it one of the most dangerous in Los Angeles history. Over 10,000 acres had already been consumed, and the winds were making it worse by the minute. I stared out the window, clutching Max to my chest. The road ahead was lined with flames licking the edges of the asphalt. The fire looked alive, writhing and reaching as if it wanted to pull us back. The heat pressed against the car windows. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. "Stay calm, Jack," my mom said, but her voice shaky. Max whimpered softly, his head resting against my arm. I stroked his fur, whispering, "It's okay, Max. We'll be fine." I wanted to believe it, but the fire was relentless, growing closer with every passing second. Then it happened. A loud cracking sound cut through the air, and suddenly, a massive tree toppled down, blocking the road just a few feet in front of us. The ground seemed to shake as it hit, scattering embers and debris. My dad slammed on the brakes, and the car jolted to a stop. For a moment, no one spoke. The world outside the car felt like it was closing in, the flames dancing just beyond the fallen tree. My mom's hand shot out, gripping my dad's arm. "What do we do now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. I stared at the tree, my mind racing. We couldn't move forward, and the fire was coming too fast. My throat tightened, and tears blurred my vision. I thought, this is it. We're not going to make it. Max looked up at me with his wide, trusting eyes, and I hugged him tightly. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, though deep down, I wasn't sure if that was true. The flames grew louder, crackling and roaring as they advanced. Smoke seeped into the car, making it hard to breathe. My dad jumped out and tried to assess the situation, but the fire's heat forced him back almost immediately. My mom reached for her phone, frantically dialing for help, her hands shaking. I could see the fear in her eyes, and for the first time, I truly understood how dangerous this moment was. We were trapped. As the fire closed in, time seemed to stretch and warp. Every second felt like an eternity. I heard my dad shouting into the phone for assistance, his voice steady despite the chaos. My mom kept glancing at me, her expression a mix of terror and determination. I buried my face in Max's fur, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing to keep myself from panicking. Then, through the thick wall of smoke, I saw flashing lights. Red and blue, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. The firefighters had arrived. They moved quickly, their silhouettes barely visible through the haze, but their presence filled me with a sense of hope. One of them approached our car, his face covered in soot but his eyes sharp and focused. "Stay calm," he said, his voice firm but kind. We're going to get you out of here. The firefighters worked together to clear a path, using chainsaws and tools to cut through the fallen tree. Their bravery was awe-inspiring, facing the flames head-on while the rest of us could only watch from a distance. The fire roared in protest, but they didn't falter. Finally, they waved us forward, signaling that it was safe to move. My dad quickly started the car, and we followed their guidance, weaving through the smoky terrain until we reached the nearest evacuation shelter. The danger had passed for now, but my heart remained heavy. We had escaped, but I couldn't stop thinking about the people still in harm's way. How many others were trapped like we had been? How many homes and lives would the fire consume before it was over? The shelter was a large shelter of YMCA of metropolitan Los Angeles, and it was filled with cars and people. Volunteers waved us in, guiding us to the park and directing us toward the entrance. Inside, the air was cool and clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating smoke outside. Families huddled together, some crying, others sitting in stunned silence. The hum of voices filled the space, a mix of relief and worry. We found a spot near the back, where my mom sank into a chair, her hands covering her face as she let out a deep, shaky breath. My dad placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before crouching down to check on Max and me. "We're safe now," he said softly, though his voice carried the weight of everything we had just been through. I glanced back toward the door, imagining the firefighters still out there, risking their lives to protect people like us. Their bravery felt almost unimaginable, and I couldn't help but wonder how many more families they were saving at that very moment. As we sat there, surrounded by strangers who had all faced the same nightmare, a sense of community began to grow. People shared blankets, snacks, and words of comfort. A volunteer handed me a bottle of water and gave Max a pat on the head, her smile a small but powerful gesture of kindness. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there are always people willing to help. But even as relief settled over us, one question lingered in my mind: what would it take to recover from this? The fire had taken so much already: homes, memories, and even lives. How could we rebuild after losing so much, and what could we do to prevent this from happening again? After the fire was settled down and when we finally returned to what used to be home, I almost didn't recognize it. The house where I grew up, where every corner held a memory, was no longer there. The front yard, where Max and I played every afternoon, had turned into a patch of blackened earth. The walls that held my bedroom, the kitchen where we shared family dinners, the living room where we laughed at silly TV shows, all of it had been reduced to ash. I stood there, holding Max's leash, trying to piece together how something so permanent could disappear so quickly. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the crunch of ash and debris under my dad's boots as he stepped carefully through what remained. My mom stood next to me, her hand gripping my shoulder tightly as if grounding us both. Her eyes were red, not from the smoke this time, but from the tears she had been holding back. I didn't know what to say. The words I wanted to find slipped away every time I opened my mouth. The fire had claimed everything. My school was gone too, a hollow shell where classrooms and hallways had once been filled with laughter and learning. Even the park down the street, the one where my friends and I used to race our bikes and play soccer, had been swallowed by the flames. It was hard to imagine the life I knew just days ago could vanish so completely. But in the middle of all that loss, we were still together. I turned to my mom and dad, their faces tired but filled with the kind of strength that made me feel safe, even now. We had Max wagging his tail faintly beside me. We had each other, and somehow, that felt like the most important thing of all. Walking through the neighborhood, I saw other families sifting through the remains of their lives. A boy my age was poking through a pile of rubble, pulling out what looked like a melted toy car. Everywhere, people were searching for something, anything, that could remind them of the life they had before. The air still carried the acrid smell of smoke, and every gust of wind kicked up a cloud of ash that stung my eyes. It felt like the fire had left behind a piece of itself, lingering over everything it touched. The Los Angeles Fire Department later reported that over 38 acres had been destroyed, along with thousands of homes and businesses. Hearing those numbers made it feel even more overwhelming, but standing there, seeing it with my own eyes, was something else entirely. I listened to the stories of strangers who felt like friends, each one a reminder that we were not alone in this. One man spoke about how he had saved his dog, just like we had saved Max. A little girl showed me a teddy bear she had managed to grab before fleeing her home. In their voices, I heard pain, but I also heard resilience. It hurt to know that the life we knew was gone, replaced by something uncertain and unfamiliar. But at the same time, I felt a spark of determination growing inside me. If the fire couldn't take our family, if it couldn't take the kindness and bravery of the people around us, then maybe it hadn't taken everything. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Before the fire, wildfires felt like something distant, stories on the news about other towns and other people. I never imagined they could turn my own life upside down. But now, after everything we've been through, I understand just how quickly things can change. One moment, I was playing in the backyard with Max, and the next, we were running for our lives. It's a lesson I'll never forget, how fragile everything can be, but also how strong people can become when faced with the unthinkable. The firefighters who saved us were heroes in every sense of the word. I still remember the one who looked right at me and promised we'd be okay. It was a promise he kept, even as the fire roared closer and the heat felt like it might swallow us. Watching them stand between the flames and our lives made me think about what it means to be brave. It's not just about not being scared, it's about doing what needs to be done, even when fear is everywhere. One day, I want to be like them, to help people when they need it most. But this fire didn't just take my home. It destroyed thousands of houses, uprooting families, businesses, and entire neighborhoods. Schools, stores, parks, everything that made those places feel alive, were gone. Families like mine were left scrambling to figure out where to go and what to do next. It wasn't just about losing things, it was about losing the sense of stability and belonging. After one day staying at the shelter, we came to my aunt's house. Currently, we're staying at my aunt's house in San Diego. It feels strange being here. I'm grateful for her kindness and for opening her home to us, but it's hard not to think about everything we left behind. I don't know how long we'll stay. My parents haven't decided yet, and I can see the worry on their faces every time they talk about it. Where will we live? What will my dad do to rebuild our home and our lives? These questions hang in the air like the smoke that lingered long after the fire was put out. Still, even with all these uncertainties, I feel lucky. I have my family. I have Max. So many people lost far more than we did, and some will never get the chance to rebuild. That thought stays with me, a reminder of just how much we still have to be thankful for. There's another thought that won't go away, though. This fire, and so many others like it, aren't just accidents of nature. They're getting worse because of us. The choices we make, the way we treat our planet, are making these disasters more frequent and more intense. Scientists said this fire was fueled by the dry conditions caused by a record-breaking drought. The winds, stronger than usual, spread the flames faster than anyone could control. It feels overwhelming, knowing how big the problem is, but it also feels like something we can't ignore. We need to be more careful with how we live and how we take care of the earth. Fires like this are a wake-up call, showing us what happens when we don't pay attention to the warning signs. I think about the park near my house, the one that used to be filled with trees and laughter, now gone. What if we planted new trees there? What if we all did something, no matter how small, to make things better? It wouldn't fix everything, but it would be a start. Even though I lost so much, I've gained something, too, a new way of seeing the world. I see how important it is to care for the people around us and to be there for each other when things fall apart. I see how much courage it takes to face something as terrifying as a wildfire and how small acts of kindness can mean everything in those moments. I see that even when the world feels like it's burning down, there's always hope for something new to grow in its place. This is my story, but it's also a reminder for all of us. Take care of each other. Take care of the planet. We only have one, and we can't afford to let it slip away. Thank you for listening. And as we move forward, I can't help but wonder, how can we turn this moment of loss into a chance to create a better future for everyone?